Sarah Martinez stepped through the glass doors of Pinnacle Financial Services on a crisp Monday morning in September, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. At 28, she had worked tirelessly to earn her promotion to senior financial analyst, a position that would finally allow her to showcase her analytical skills and strategic thinking. The downtown office building stretched 40 floors into the Seattle sky, and Sarah felt both humbled and determined as she made her way to the elevator. Her new supervisor, James Thornfield, had called her into his office within the first hour. James was a tall, imposing man in his early 50s, with silver hair and an expensive suit that seemed to announce his authority before he even spoke. Sarah knocked on his doorframe, and he gestured for her to sit without looking up from his computer screen. "Martinez, right?" he said, finally glancing at her with a brief, dismissive look. "I've reviewed your file. Bachelor's degree from state school, worked your way up from data entry. Impressive, I suppose, for someone with your background." Sarah felt a slight sting at the way he emphasized your background, but she maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield. I'm excited to contribute to the team and learn from everyone here." James leaned back in his leather chair, his expression neutral but somehow condescending. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This department handles some of the firm's most important clients. We're talking about people who manage portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They expect a certain level of refinement from the people they work with." The word refinement hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah understood the implication immediately, but she chose to focus on the work itself. "I understand the importance of these accounts, sir. I've been preparing for this role for months, studying advanced portfolio theory and risk management strategies." "Academic knowledge is one thing," James replied, straightening some papers on his desk. "But our clients aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're sophisticated individuals who've built their wealth through decades of smart decisions. They can spot someone who doesn't belong in their world from a mile away." Sarah felt her cheeks warm, but she kept her voice steady. "I believe my analysis speaks for itself, Mr. Thornfield. My previous supervisor mentioned that my risk assessment models helped prevent significant losses during the market volatility last quarter." James nodded absently, as if her accomplishments were mere footnotes. "Yes, well, you'll be starting with some smaller accounts. Nothing too complex. We need to see how you handle yourself before we can consider giving you anything substantial." The meeting continued for another 15 minutes, with James outlining her initial responsibilities. Sarah noticed that despite her senior analyst title, her assigned accounts were primarily small business owners and middle-class investors, while her colleagues with similar experience levels were handling wealthy corporate executives and established trust funds. After the meeting, Sarah walked to her new desk, a modest workspace in the corner of the analyst floor. Her cubicle was smaller than she had expected, positioned away from the windows and the premium workspace areas where other senior analysts sat. She unpacked her few personal items: a framed photo of her parents at her college graduation, a small succulent plant, and a motivational quote card that read, "Excellence is never an accident." Her colleague Marcus Chen, a friendly analyst who had started 6 months earlier, stopped by to welcome her. Marcus had attended an Ivy League school and often spoke about his family's connections in the financial industry, but he had always been kind to Sarah during her previous interactions with the department. "Hey, Sarah, congratulations on the promotion," Marcus said, perching on the edge of her desk. "How did the meeting with Thornfield go?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to share. "Fine, I think. He's assigned me some accounts to start with, smaller ones to help me learn the ropes." Marcus frowned slightly. "Smaller ones? That's odd. When I started, they gave me a mix of different account sizes. What kind of clients are you working with?" Sarah pulled up her assignment list on her computer. "Looks like mostly small business owners, a few individual retirement accounts, some middle-market clients." Marcus said, his expression growing more concerned. "That's definitely unusual for a senior analyst position. Most of us started with at least a few significant accounts." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Has Thornfield mentioned anything about expanding your portfolio soon?" "He said we need to see how I handle myself first," Sarah replied, trying to keep any disappointment out of her voice. Marcus nodded slowly, but Sarah could see he was troubled by something. Well, I'm sure it's just a cautious approach. If you need any help getting oriented, just let me know. The systems here can be pretty complex at first. As Marcus walked away, Sarah tried to focus on the positive aspects of her situation. She had worked hard for this promotion, and she was determined to prove herself regardless of the circumstances. She spent the rest of the day familiarizing herself with her new accounts, reviewing financial statements and market positions. Her first client call was scheduled for the following morning with Robert Chen, a small restaurant owner who had been investing his profits in a conservative portfolio for retirement. Sarah spent hours that evening preparing, researching market trends and developing several strategic recommendations that could help optimize his returns while maintaining his preferred risk level. The next morning, Sarah dialed Robert's number from her desk phone, her notes spread neatly in front of her. The conversation went smoothly, with Robert expressing appreciation for her thorough analysis and practical suggestions. By the end of the call, he had agreed to implement 2 of her recommendations, which would potentially increase his annual returns by 3 percentage points. Sarah felt a surge of confidence as she hung up the phone. This was exactly the kind of work she loved, using her analytical skills to help people achieve their financial goals. She immediately began documenting the call and preparing implementation plans for Robert's portfolio adjustments. However, her positive mood was interrupted when she overheard a conversation between James and another senior manager, Patricia Walsh, as they passed by her cubicle area. She wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but their voices carried clearly in the open office environment. "I'm not sure what HR was thinking with this latest promotion," James was saying in a low voice. "We're dealing with some very particular clients here, Patricia, people who have certain expectations about the kind of professionals they work with." Patricia's response was equally quiet but audible. "Well, diversity initiatives are important, James. The firm is committed to expanding opportunities." Of course, James replied quickly. "I'm all for equal opportunity. But there's a difference between equal opportunity and setting someone up to fail. These clients can be quite demanding about cultural fit and presentation." Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she realized they were talking about her. She tried to focus on her computer screen, but their words continued to filter through her consciousness. "Maybe she'll surprise you," Patricia suggested. "Her academic records are excellent, and her previous performance reviews were outstanding." "Academic performance is one thing," James said, his voice taking on a slightly frustrated tone. "But managing high net worth individuals requires a certain level of social sophistication. These people want to work with professionals who understand their world, who can relate to their lifestyle and concerns. Give her a chance, James. She might prove you wrong." "Oh, I intend to give her every opportunity to succeed," James replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I've started her with some appropriate accounts where she can learn without causing any major problems." The conversation faded as they moved away, but Sarah sat frozen at her desk, her hands clenched in her lap. The implications of what she had just heard were crystal clear. James had assigned her smaller, less prestigious accounts not because she needed training, but because he believed she wasn't sophisticated enough to handle wealthy clients. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Sarah completed her work diligently, preparing detailed analyses for her assigned accounts and researching market trends. But underneath her professional exterior, she was processing the reality of her situation. She had worked incredibly hard to reach this position, sacrificing social activities and personal relationships to focus on her career development. Her parents, both hardworking immigrants who had cleaned office buildings to pay for her education, had been so proud when she called to tell them about her promotion. Now she was beginning to understand that her title might be more symbolic than substantive. The accounts she had been given were important to their individual owners, certainly, but they represented a fraction of the revenue and prestige associated with the firm's major clients. She was being positioned as a junior analyst despite her senior title, confined to a specific tier of clients based on assumptions about her background and capabilities. That evening, Sarah called her best friend Maya, who worked as a marketing manager at a tech company across town. Maya had always been Sarah's sounding board for workplace challenges, offering both emotional support and practical advice. "I can't believe he actually said that," Maya said after Sarah recounted the overheard conversation. "That's discrimination, plain and simple." "But is it?" Sarah asked, pacing around her small apartment. "He didn't explicitly mention my ethnicity or background. He talked about cultural fit and social sophistication. Maybe he has a point about client preferences. Sarah, listen to yourself, Maya said firmly. You have the same qualifications as anyone else in that department. You've proven your abilities over and over again. The only difference is your last name and the fact that your parents weren't wealthy. Sarah sank onto her couch, feeling the weight of the situation settling around her. I just don't know if it's worth fighting. Maybe I should just focus on doing excellent work with the accounts I have and proving myself gradually. That's exactly what they're counting on, Maya replied. They're hoping you'll accept second-class treatment quietly and be grateful for whatever scraps they throw your way. The conversation continued for another hour, with Maya encouraging Sarah to document everything and consider speaking with HR about her concerns. But Sarah felt torn between wanting to stand up for herself and fearing that making waves could jeopardize her career entirely. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah looked at the framed photo of her parents on her nightstand. Her father had worked 2 jobs while attending night school to learn English and basic business skills. Her mother had cleaned offices for 15 years while raising 3 children, always emphasizing the importance of education and hard work. They had sacrificed so much to give their children opportunities they had never had. Sarah made a quiet promise to herself that she wouldn't let their sacrifices be diminished by someone else's narrow assumptions about who belonged in positions of authority and influence. She didn't know exactly how she would handle the situation yet, but she was determined to find a way to prove that excellence and dedication mattered more than pedigree and connections. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office 30 minutes early, determined to approach her work with renewed focus and strategic thinking. She had spent the previous evening developing a comprehensive plan for one of her assigned accounts, a small technology startup whose founder had been struggling to optimize his company's cash flow management. As she reviewed her analysis, Sarah realized that her approach to this client's needs was actually quite innovative, incorporating some cutting-edge financial modeling techniques she had learned through independent study. The startup situation required creative thinking and adaptability, skills that weren't necessarily developed through traditional wealth management experience. This realization sparked an idea that would eventually become the foundation for her unexpected response to the discriminatory treatment she had encountered. Sarah began to see that her different perspective and background might actually be advantages rather than limitations, especially when working with clients who themselves had built their success through unconventional paths. She smiled to herself as she saved her work, feeling a spark of determination that would soon grow into something much more powerful. 3 weeks into her new position, Sarah had thrown herself into her work with an intensity that surprised even her. She arrived early each morning and stayed late most evenings, meticulously analyzing every aspect of her assigned accounts. While her colleagues handled their prestigious portfolios with routine efficiency, Sarah approached each of her smaller accounts as if they were her most important clients in the world. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly through her work with Maria Santos, a single mother who owned 3 successful food trucks in different Seattle neighborhoods. Maria had been investing her profits conservatively, but Sarah noticed patterns in her business cycles that suggested opportunities for more strategic financial planning. Sarah spent hours studying Maria's business model, visiting her food truck locations during lunch breaks, and analyzing the seasonal fluctuations in her revenue streams. She discovered that Maria's businesses generated significantly higher profits during summer months and around major city events, but she had been managing her cash flow as if her income were steady year-round. Mrs. Santos, Sarah said during their monthly phone call, I've been analyzing your business patterns, and I think we might be able to optimize your investment strategy significantly. Maria's voice carried a note of skepticism. My previous advisor always told me to keep things simple, you know? I don't want to take unnecessary risks with money I've worked so hard to save. I completely understand, Sarah replied, her voice warm with genuine empathy. But what I'm suggesting isn't about taking bigger risks. It's about aligning your investment timeline with your business reality. Sarah explained her analysis in detail, showing how Maria could take advantage of seasonal cash flow patterns to maximize her investment returns. Instead of keeping large cash reserves earning minimal interest year-round, Sarah proposed a strategy that would allow Maria to invest more aggressively during her high-earning months, while maintaining adequate liquidity for her slower periods. The strategy was complex, requiring careful timing and multiple account types. But Sarah had developed detailed projections showing how it could increase Maria's annual returns by nearly 40% without significantly increasing her overall risk exposure. Maria was initially hesitant, but Sarah's thorough preparation and clear explanations gradually won her confidence. "You know what?" Maria said finally. "My gut tells me you really understand my situation. Let's try it." Implementing Maria's new strategy required Sarah to coordinate with multiple departments within the firm, manage several different account types, and maintain careful oversight of the timing for various transactions. It was far more complex than the standard portfolio management her colleagues typically handled for small business owners. The results were remarkable. Within 2 months, Maria's portfolio performance had improved dramatically, and she was so pleased that she referred 2 other food truck owners to Sarah. Word began to spread through Seattle's small business community about a financial analyst who truly understood the challenges faced by entrepreneurs from working-class backgrounds. Sarah's reputation grew quietly but steadily. Her clients appreciated her accessibility, her willingness to explain complex financial concepts in plain language, and her genuine interest in understanding their unique situations. Unlike many financial advisors who seemed to speak down to small business owners or treated them as minor inconveniences, Sarah approached each relationship with respect and enthusiasm. Her success with Maria's account caught the attention of David Kim, a senior partner who oversaw the firm's business development initiatives. David had built his own career by identifying underserved market segments and developing innovative approaches to meet their needs. One afternoon, David stopped by Sarah's desk with a curious expression. "Martinez, I've been hearing interesting things about your work with some of our small business accounts. Maria Santos called to express her appreciation for your service, and apparently she's been telling other business owners about you." Sarah looked up from her computer, unsure whether this attention was positive or potentially problematic. "I hope everything has been satisfactory, Mr. Kim. I've been trying to provide the best possible service to all my assigned accounts." David smiled, pulling up a chair beside her desk. "More than satisfactory, apparently. Maria's portfolio performance has been exceptional, and she's brought us 3 new accounts in the past month. That's unusual for our small business segment. I've been working to understand each client's unique situation," Sarah explained carefully. "Many small business owners have complex cash flow patterns that require more sophisticated planning than traditional investment approaches." "Exactly," David said, his excitement becoming apparent. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of around here. Tell me, what's your perspective on our current approach to the small business market segment?" Sarah hesitated, sensing both an opportunity and a potential trap. She had observed several areas where the firm's standard practices seemed poorly suited to entrepreneurial clients, but criticizing established procedures could be risky for someone in her position. "Well," she began slowly, "I think many small business owners have been underserved by traditional wealth management approaches. Their financial situations are often more dynamic and complex than standard models account for." David leaned forward, clearly interested. "Go on." "For example, most of our standard portfolio models assume steady, predictable income streams, but entrepreneurs often have highly variable earnings, seasonal fluctuations, and reinvestment needs that require much more flexible strategies. And you've been developing customized approaches for these situations?" Sarah nodded, feeling more confident as she discussed her work. "Each client's business model creates unique opportunities and challenges. A restaurant owner has different needs than a contractor, who has different needs than a retail shop owner. The solutions need to be as diverse as the businesses themselves." David was quiet for a moment, seemingly processing Sarah's words. Then he smiled broadly. "I want to propose something to you, Sarah. How would you feel about taking on some additional responsibilities in this area?" Before Sarah could respond, James Thornfield appeared at her cubicle, his expression darkening as he noticed David's presence. "David, I didn't realize you were meeting with Martinez. Is there something I should know about?" David stood, his demeanor remaining friendly but becoming more formal. "James, I was just discussing Sarah's excellent work with our small business clients. She's been generating some impressive results and bringing in new accounts." James's smile looked forced. "Well, that's wonderful to hear. Of course, small business accounts are a great place for junior staff to develop their skills before moving on to more sophisticated client relationships." "Actually," David replied, his tone becoming slightly cooler, "I was thinking her approach might be applicable to some of our larger entrepreneurial clients as well. We have several high-net-worth individuals who built their wealth through business ownership, and they might benefit from someone who really understands that perspective. Sarah watched this exchange with fascination and growing anxiety. She could sense the underlying tension between the two men, and she realized that her work was somehow becoming a focal point for broader disagreements within the firm's management structure. James's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, David, but I think it's important to ensure our staff members are properly prepared before we expose them to our most valuable client relationships. Martinez is still learning our systems and developing her client management skills. Her client satisfaction scores are among the highest in the firm," David pointed out, "and her portfolio performance numbers speak for themselves. Performance with small accounts doesn't necessarily translate to success with sophisticated investors," James replied, his voice taking on a slightly condescending tone. "Our high-net-worth clients have very specific expectations about the professionals they work with." Sarah felt her cheeks burn as she recognized the familiar refrain about sophisticated investors and specific expectations. David glanced at her, and she could see that he had picked up on the underlying implications of James's words. "I think you might be surprised by Sarah's capabilities," David said quietly. "Perhaps we should let her performance speak for itself rather than making assumptions about her limitations." The conversation ended awkwardly, with David departing after arranging to continue their discussion later. James lingered for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Martinez," he said finally, "I hope you understand that developing your skills gradually is in your best interest. Taking on responsibilities you're not ready for could be damaging to your career." After James left, Sarah sat at her desk feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. David's interest in her work was encouraging, but James's obvious resistance suggested that pursuing new opportunities could create significant challenges. That evening, Sarah decided to take a different approach to evaluating her situation. Instead of focusing on the obstacles and discriminatory attitudes she faced, she began to analyze her circumstances as if they were a business challenge requiring strategic solutions. She opened a notebook and began writing down her observations about the firm's market positioning, client needs, and competitive advantages. What she discovered was that Pinnacle Financial Services, like many traditional wealth management firms, had been slow to adapt to the changing demographics of wealth creation. The firm's client acquisition strategies and service models were primarily designed for inherited wealth and traditional corporate executives. However, the Seattle market included a growing population of self-made entrepreneurs, technology professionals, and immigrant business owners who had built substantial wealth through unconventional paths. These emerging wealthy clients often felt disconnected from traditional financial services, which seemed designed for people with different backgrounds and experiences. Many of them preferred advisors who understood their journeys from working-class backgrounds to financial success, who could relate to their concerns about family obligations and community responsibilities. Sarah realized that her background, which James viewed as a limitation, could actually be a significant competitive advantage in serving this underrepresented but growing market segment. Her ability to understand the perspectives of self-made entrepreneurs, her multilingual capabilities, and her experience navigating between different cultural and economic environments were exactly the skills needed to serve these clients effectively. She began developing a comprehensive analysis of this market opportunity, researching demographics, wealth trends, and competitive positioning. Her research revealed that several major financial firms had already begun developing specialized services for emerging wealthy populations, recognizing this as a significant growth opportunity. Armed with this analysis, Sarah started formulating a strategy that could benefit both herself and Pinnacle Financial Services. Instead of fighting against the limitations placed on her current role, she would demonstrate the value of her unique perspective by excelling in the market segment where she had natural advantages. Over the next several weeks, Sarah continued to build relationships with her assigned clients, while quietly expanding her research into the broader market opportunity. She began attending small business networking events in the evenings, not as a company representative, but as someone interested in learning about the financial challenges faced by entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. At these events, Sarah met dozens of successful business owners who expressed frustration with their current financial advisors. Many felt that their advisors didn't understand their businesses, didn't respect their decision-making capabilities, or seemed uncomfortable with their cultural backgrounds or unconventional paths to success. Sarah listened carefully to these concerns, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. She began to understand that the problem wasn't just about investment strategies or portfolio performance. Many of these entrepreneurs were looking for financial partners who could relate to their experiences and understand their values, who could help them navigate the transition from working-class backgrounds to substantial wealth. One evening at a Latino Business Association meeting, Sarah met Carlos Rodriguez, who had built a successful construction company over 15 years. Carlos managed a portfolio worth nearly $2 million, well above the threshold for Pinnacle's premium services. But he had been relegated to working with junior staff at his current firm. "They treat me like I don't know anything about money," Carlos told Sarah during their conversation. "I built this business from nothing. I understand risk and return better than most people, but they want to put me in some cookie-cutter portfolio because they think I can't handle complexity." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Have you considered looking for an advisor who specializes in working with business owners?" "I've tried," Carlos replied. "But most of the specialists want to work with people who have 10 million or more. And the ones who will work with someone at my level, well, let's just say they don't always seem comfortable with clients who look like me." This conversation crystallized Sarah's understanding of the opportunity she had identified. There was a significant population of successful entrepreneurs who were underserved by traditional wealth management firms, not because they lacked investable assets, but because they didn't fit the cultural and social profiles that these firms were designed to serve. Sarah began to envision a service model that could address this gap while leveraging her unique background and skills. Instead of trying to prove that she could serve traditional wealthy clients as well as her colleagues, she would demonstrate that she could serve a different but equally valuable client segment better than anyone else in the firm. This strategy would require careful execution and strong performance metrics, but it offered a path forward that didn't require her to deny or minimize her background. Instead, her experiences would become her greatest professional assets. As she refined her plans, Sarah felt a growing sense of confidence and excitement. She was no longer just reacting to discriminatory treatment. She was developing a proactive strategy that could transform her career while providing valuable services to underserved clients. The next phase of her plan would require her to propose a formal expansion of her role, backed by solid research and demonstrated results. Sarah knew this would likely create conflict with James and others who preferred to maintain traditional approaches, but she was prepared to make her case based on business value, rather than fairness or equal opportunity arguments. She was about to transform from someone seeking acceptance in an existing system to someone proposing to change that system in fundamental ways. Sarah spent the next month meticulously preparing what she privately called the business case. Working late into the evenings and throughout weekends, she compiled demographic data, market research, competitive analysis, and detailed financial projections. Her dining table became a command center, covered with spreadsheets, industry reports, and client profiles. Her research revealed compelling statistics that supported her hypothesis. The Seattle metropolitan area had experienced a 43% increase in Hispanic-owned businesses over the past 5 years, with average annual revenues growing by 67%. Asian American entrepreneurship had grown even more dramatically, fueled by technology sector success stories. Meanwhile, traditional wealth management firms had captured less than 15% of this emerging market segment. More importantly, Sarah discovered that entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds tended to accumulate wealth more quickly than their representation in premium financial services would suggest. Many had simply given up trying to find advisors who understood their perspectives and had settled for basic investment services that didn't fully utilize their assets. Sarah's own client portfolio provided perfect case studies. In just 2 months, she had increased her account base from 8 clients to 19. With total assets under management growing from $2.3 million to $6.8 million. Her client retention rate was 100%, and her average client satisfaction scores exceeded those of every other analyst in the department. Most significantly, her clients were referring new business at a rate nearly 5 times higher than the department average. This organic growth suggested that she was meeting genuine market needs rather than simply performing well with arbitrarily assigned accounts. Armed with this data, Sarah requested a meeting with David Kim to discuss what she termed a strategic market opportunity. She carefully avoided mentioning James initially, framing her proposal as a business development initiative rather than a response to discriminatory treatment. David agreed to meet on a Thursday afternoon in one of the firm's smaller conference rooms. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, arranging her materials and practicing her presentation one final time. She had condensed 40 hours of research into a concise 20-minute presentation with supporting documentation. When David arrived, he seemed genuinely interested in hearing her ideas. "I've been watching your performance numbers, Sarah. Your results have been impressive across the board. What's this opportunity you wanted to discuss?" Sarah began with market data, presenting demographic trends and wealth accumulation patterns in clear professional terms. She explained the gap between market potential and current service delivery, using charts and graphs to illustrate her points. "The opportunity represents approximately $340 million in currently underserved assets within our primary market area," Sarah concluded. "Based on my analysis, we could capture at least 15% of this market within 18 months with the right service approach." David studied her projections carefully. "This is very thorough work, Sarah. What kind of service model are you proposing?" "A specialized wealth management program designed specifically for entrepreneurial clients from diverse backgrounds," Sarah replied. "The key differentiator would be cultural competency combined with deep understanding of small business financial dynamics." She outlined her proposed service model, which included bilingual capabilities, flexible meeting schedules to accommodate business owners' unpredictable hours, specialized investment strategies for variable income streams, and educational components to help clients navigate the transition from business ownership to wealth preservation. "The initial investment would be minimal," Sarah explained. "We already have the infrastructure and regulatory framework. The primary requirement would be dedicated staff with appropriate backgrounds and training." David nodded thoughtfully. "And I assume you're proposing to lead this initiative?" "I'd like to be considered for that role," Sarah replied carefully. "My background and current client results suggest I could be effective in this market segment." David leaned back in his chair, considering her proposal. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need more of around here. The demographics you've identified are undeniable, and your performance data is compelling." He paused for a moment. "There's just one challenge we need to address. This would require approval from department management, and I'm not sure how receptive James will be to expanding your responsibilities." Sarah had anticipated this obstacle. "I've been thinking about that. What if we presented it as a pilot program? A 6-month trial to test the concept with measurable success metrics. If it doesn't work, we discontinue it with minimal risk. If it succeeds, we have a template for broader implementation." "That's smart positioning," David agreed. "What kind of metrics would you propose?" Sarah opened another folder. "Client acquisition targets, asset growth goals, retention rates, and profitability measures, all benchmarked against current department performance." She handed David a detailed implementation timeline with specific milestones and evaluation criteria. "I've also included risk assessment and contingency planning. The downside exposure is very limited, while the upside potential is substantial." David spent several minutes reviewing her materials, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Sarah could see that he was genuinely impressed with the thoroughness of her research and the professionalism of her presentation. "I'm going to need some time to review this with senior management," David said finally. "But I want you to know that this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that drives business growth. Regardless of how this specific proposal develops, you've demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't go unrecognized." After David left, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. She had presented her case as effectively as possible, but she knew that organizational politics and entrenched attitudes could override business logic. Her answer came sooner than expected. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her desk to find an email from James requesting an immediate meeting in his office. The tone was formal and somewhat ominous. Sarah knocked on James's doorframe, and he gestured for her to sit without his usual pretense of being too busy to look up. This time, his attention was focused entirely on her, and his expression was not friendly. "Martinez, I understand you've been developing some ambitious ideas about expanding your role here," James began, his voice carefully controlled. "Yes, sir. I presented some market research to Mr. Kim yesterday about potential opportunities in the entrepreneur segment." James leaned forward slightly. "Let me be very clear about something. This department has established procedures for business development and client acquisition. We don't need junior staff members freelancing their own marketing initiatives." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but she maintained her professional composure. I apologize if I overstepped any boundaries, Mr. Thornfield. I was simply trying to identify ways to contribute to the firm's growth. Your job is to manage the accounts you've been assigned and develop your skills gradually, James replied, not to redesign our business model based on a few months of limited experience. The dismissive tone in his voice triggered something in Sarah that she had been suppressing for weeks. She realized that no amount of professional deference was going to change his fundamental assumptions about her capabilities and proper place within the organization. With respect, sir, Sarah said, her voice remaining calm but gaining strength, my proposal was based on extensive market research and demonstrated results. My client acquisition and portfolio performance metrics exceed department averages across all categories. James's expression hardened. Performance with small accounts doesn't qualify you to make strategic decisions about our market positioning. Our premium clients require a level of sophistication and cultural understanding that takes years to develop. There it was again, the coded language about sophistication and cultural understanding. Sarah felt a clarity she had never experienced before, as if a fog had suddenly lifted. Mr. Thornfield, she said, meeting his gaze directly, can you explain specifically what you mean by cultural understanding and how that relates to investment analysis and portfolio management? James seemed taken aback by her directness. I mean that our high-net-worth clients come from established backgrounds. They expect to work with professionals who understand their social and business environments. And you don't believe I can understand those environments? I think, James said, his voice becoming more strained, that there are natural affinities between certain types of clients and certain types of advisors. It's not about capability, it's about fit. Sarah nodded slowly, finally understanding the game that had been played around her for months. So when you assigned me exclusively to small business owners and middle-class clients, that was based on your assessment of my natural affinities rather than my professional qualifications. I assigned you accounts appropriate for someone at your experience level, James replied, but his discomfort was becoming apparent. Even though other analysts with similar experience levels were assigned mixed portfolios including high-net-worth clients, James shifted in his chair. Every situation is different. I make assignment decisions based on multiple factors. Sarah realized that she had reached a critical moment. She could back down, accept the limitations being placed on her, and hope that gradual progress might eventually overcome the barriers she faced. Or she could force a direct confrontation about the discriminatory treatment she had been receiving. Mr. Thornfield, she said, her voice clear and confident, I believe my proposal has merit based on objective business criteria. I'd like to request that it be evaluated by senior management based on those criteria rather than assumptions about cultural fit. James's expression became openly hostile. I'm telling you that the proposal is not appropriate, Martinez. I expect you to focus on your assigned responsibilities and stop pursuing these distractions. Is that an official directive? Sarah asked. Yes, it is. Sarah nodded, standing from her chair. Then I'll need that directive in writing, along with the specific business reasons for rejecting a proposal that projects $51 million in new assets under management within 18 months. James stared at her, clearly not having expected such a direct response. Excuse me? If you're rejecting a business development proposal with documented market research and financial projections, I assume you have specific business reasons that should be documented. I'd like to understand those reasons so I can improve future proposals. The room fell silent for a long moment. Sarah could see that James was struggling to formulate a response that would justify his position without revealing his underlying assumptions. The proposal is premature, he said finally. You need more experience before taking on expanded responsibilities. How much more experience specifically, and what criteria will be used to evaluate my readiness? James's discomfort was now obvious. That will be determined based on your ongoing performance and development. I see, Sarah replied. And will those evaluation criteria be the same ones applied to other analysts seeking expanded responsibilities? Before James could respond, there was a knock on his office door. David Kim appeared, his expression neutral but alert. James, Sarah, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to follow up on our discussion about the market research proposal. James's face flushed slightly. David, I was just explaining to Martinez that her proposal is not appropriate for someone at her level. David glanced at Sarah, then back at James. Really? I found the research quite impressive. Very thorough market analysis and compelling financial projections. She needs to focus on her current responsibilities, James insisted. Her current performance suggests she's handling those responsibilities quite well, David replied. In fact, she's exceeded performance targets in every category. Sarah realized that she was witnessing a power struggle that went beyond her individual situation. David's support for her proposal was challenging James's authority and decision-making process. I think we should schedule a broader discussion about this opportunity, perhaps with Patricia Walsh and other senior management. The market potential is significant enough to warrant serious consideration. James looked trapped between his personal resistance to Sarah's advancement and the business logic of her proposal. Of course, we can discuss it further, but I maintain that Martinez isn't ready for this level of responsibility. What specific qualifications is she lacking? David asked directly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah watched James's face as he struggled to articulate objections that would sound legitimate rather than discriminatory. Experience with high-net-worth clients, James said finally, which she can't gain if she's never given the opportunity to work with them, David pointed out. Sophistication in dealing with complex social and business environments. Based on what assessment? Her client satisfaction scores are outstanding. James fell silent, realizing that every objection he raised was being systematically dismantled. Sarah seized the moment. Mr. Kim, I appreciate your support for evaluating the proposal. Thornfield, I understand your concerns about my experience level. Perhaps we could establish specific benchmarks and a timeline for developing the qualifications you've identified. This suggestion offered James a face-saving compromise while maintaining pressure for concrete progress. David nodded approvingly. That seems reasonable, David said. Why don't we schedule a meeting for next week to discuss implementation details and success metrics? After both men left, Sarah sat alone in James's office for a moment, processing what had just occurred. She had forced a direct confrontation about the barriers she faced, challenged discriminatory decision-making, and secured senior management support for her advancement. More importantly, she had discovered that her carefully prepared business case was strong enough to overcome personal prejudices when subjected to objective evaluation. Her unexpected response to being mocked for her rank wasn't anger or complaints about unfairness, but rather a professional, data-driven proposal that was impossible to dismiss on legitimate business grounds. The real battle was just beginning. But Sarah felt a confidence she had never experienced before. She was no longer asking for acceptance or permission. She was proposing solutions and demanding professional evaluation based on merit rather than assumptions. Walking back to her desk, Sarah realized that she had fundamentally changed her relationship with the organization and her own career trajectory. Instead of trying to prove that she belonged in an existing system, she was working to create new opportunities that leveraged her unique strengths and perspectives. The following week brought an unexpected development that would accelerate Sarah's timeline dramatically. On Monday morning, she received a phone call from Elena Vasquez, a prominent Seattle entrepreneur whom Sarah had met briefly at a business networking event several weeks earlier. Elena owned a chain of successful medical practices that she had built over 12 years, starting with a single clinic in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. Her business had grown to include 5 locations and generated annual revenues exceeding $8 million. More importantly, Elena had accumulated personal wealth of approximately $15 million, placing her firmly in Pinnacle's target demographic for premium wealth management services. Sarah, I hope you remember meeting me at the Latino Business Association meeting last month, Elena said when Sarah answered her phone. I've been thinking about our conversation regarding financial advisory services. Sarah remembered Elena vividly. She was an impressive woman in her early 40s who had immigrated from Mexico as a teenager, earned her medical degree through scholarships and part-time work, and built her practice while raising 3 children as a single mother. Elena represented exactly the type of successful entrepreneur that Sarah had identified in her market research. Of course, Dr. Vasquez. How can I help you? I'm looking to change financial advisors, Elena explained. My current firm has been unsatisfactory. They don't seem to understand my business or my goals, and I frankly don't think they take me seriously. Several people have mentioned your name as someone who might be different. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate. Elena represented exactly the type of client that her proposed service model was designed to serve, but she was also far above the asset threshold that James had established for Sarah's client assignments. "I'd be very interested in discussing your financial planning needs," Sarah said carefully. "Let me check my calendar and see when we might be able to meet." "Actually," Elena continued, "I'm hoping we could meet this week. I'm in the process of selling one of my clinic locations, and I need to make some strategic decisions about the proceeds. We're talking about approximately $3 million that needs to be invested appropriately." Sarah realized that this conversation could change everything. A successful engagement with Elena would validate her entire thesis about underserved market segments, while generating substantial revenue for the firm. However, accepting Elena as a client would require her to exceed her current authority and potentially create direct conflict with James. "Dr. Vasquez, I want to be completely transparent with you about my current situation," Sarah said, making a split-second decision to prioritize honesty over opportunity. "I'm very interested in working with you, but I should explain that I'm in the process of proposing an expanded service model for clients like yourself. There may be some internal approvals required before I can officially take on your account." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Are you saying that your firm might not want to work with me?" "Not at all," Sarah replied quickly. "The firm would definitely want your business. The question is whether they'll allow me specifically to serve as your primary advisor, given that I'm still establishing my credentials with high-net-worth clients." "I see," Elena said, her voice taking on a slightly cooler tone. "Well, that's exactly the kind of attitude I'm trying to get away from. I'm not interested in working with a firm that doesn't think you're qualified to manage my account." Sarah felt a surge of panic, realizing that her honesty might cost her the most important opportunity of her career. "Dr. Vasquez, please don't let my internal situation affect your opinion of the firm's capabilities. I'm confident we can provide excellent service regardless of who is officially designated as your primary advisor." "Sarah," Elena said firmly, "I want to work with you specifically. If your firm doesn't think you're capable of managing my account, then they're telling me something about how they view clients like me as well." This observation struck Sarah with startling clarity. Elena was absolutely right. If the firm believed that Sarah wasn't sophisticated enough to serve wealthy clients, they were implicitly suggesting that Elena herself wasn't sophisticated enough to deserve their best advisors. "You know what," Sarah said, feeling a surge of determination. "Let me see what I can arrange. Would you be available to meet Thursday afternoon?" "Yes, I can make time Thursday. But Sarah, I want you to know that I'm prepared to take my business elsewhere if I sense any reluctance or second-class treatment." After ending the call, Sarah sat at her desk contemplating her options. She could seek James's approval to meet with Elena, risking his rejection and potentially damaging Elena's interest. She could arrange the meeting without explicit approval, hoping to present success as justification. Or she could refer Elena to another advisor, sacrificing a transformative opportunity to avoid conflict. Sarah decided on a fourth approach. She would request the meeting through official channels while simultaneously ensuring that Elena's experience would be exceptional regardless of the internal politics. She walked directly to James's office and knocked on his doorframe. "Mr. Thornfield, I have a situation that requires your guidance." James looked up from his computer with apparent irritation. "What is it, Martinez?" "I've received an inquiry from a potential client with approximately $15 million in investable assets. She specifically requested to work with me, but I want to ensure proper protocols are followed." James's expression shifted from irritation to confusion to interest in rapid succession. $15 million? That's about history. "How did she hear about you?" "Professional networking. She's a physician who owns multiple medical practices. She's looking to invest proceeds from a business sale." Sarah watched James process this information. She could see him weighing his desire to control her activities against the substantial revenue opportunity that Elena represented. "What's her background?" James asked. "She's built a very successful practice over 12 years. She's well established in the medical community and has an excellent reputation." Sarah deliberately omitted details about Elena's ethnicity and immigration history, knowing that this information might trigger James's concerns about cultural fit. "I suppose we should arrange a meeting," James said slowly. "But I think it would be appropriate for me to participate, given the account size." Sarah had anticipated this response. "Of course. I think she'd appreciate meeting with senior management. She seems like a very sophisticated investor." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock in one of the firm's premium conference rooms. Sarah spent the intervening days preparing extensively, developing customized investment recommendations based on Elena's business situation and financial goals. She also took the precaution of briefing David Kim about the meeting, explaining Elena's background and the potential significance of this engagement for her proposed market expansion. "This could be exactly the kind of case study we need to validate your business model," David observed. "A successful engagement would demonstrate that you can serve high-net-worth clients effectively while accessing market segments that other advisors have difficulty reaching." On Thursday morning, Sarah arrived early to set up the conference room and review her materials one final time. Elena arrived precisely on time, dressed in an elegant business suit that conveyed both professionalism and success. Sarah greeted her warmly, grateful to see that Elena's demeanor remained positive despite their earlier conversation about potential obstacles. James joined them a few minutes later, and Sarah made the introductions. She watched carefully as James assessed Elena, noting his slightly surprised expression as he took in Elena's polished appearance and confident bearing. "Dr. Vasquez, it's a pleasure to meet you," James said, extending his hand with his practiced professional smile. "Sarah tells me you're looking to optimize your investment strategy." "That's correct," Elena replied. "I'm in the process of selling one of my practice locations, and I need to make some strategic decisions about deploying the proceeds." Sarah began the meeting by presenting her analysis of Elena's current financial position and investment objectives. She had prepared detailed recommendations that took into account Elena's business cash flows, retirement planning goals, and tax optimization needs. As Sarah presented her analysis, she noticed Elena's engagement and James's growing awareness that he was witnessing a sophisticated, professional consultation. Elena asked informed questions about risk assessment, asset allocation strategies, and estate planning implications that demonstrated her financial sophistication. "Sarah has clearly done her homework," Elena commented after reviewing the investment recommendations. "This analysis is more comprehensive than anything my previous advisor provided, and it actually addresses the specific challenges I face as a business owner." James nodded, though Sarah could see he was still processing the disconnect between his assumptions about Elena and the reality of her sophistication and wealth. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, covering various aspects of Elena's financial planning needs. Sarah found herself operating at the highest level of her analytical and communication abilities, drawing on all her technical knowledge while demonstrating the cultural competency that made her uniquely effective with clients like Elena. Near the end of the meeting, Elena made her decision clear. "I'm impressed with Sarah's analysis and approach. I'd like to move forward with transferring my accounts to Pinnacle, with Sarah as my primary advisor." James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dr. Vasquez, I want to ensure you receive the highest level of service possible. Given the size of your portfolio, you might benefit from working with one of our senior advisors who has extensive experience with high-net-worth clients." Elena's expression cooled noticeably. "Are you suggesting that Sarah isn't qualified to manage my account?" "Not at all," James replied quickly. "I'm simply ensuring that you have access to our most experienced professionals. Sarah has demonstrated exactly the kind of expertise and understanding I'm looking for," Elena said firmly. "If she's not qualified to be my primary advisor, then perhaps Pinnacle isn't the right fit for my needs." Sarah watched this exchange with fascination, seeing her career trajectory hanging in the balance. Elena was essentially forcing James to choose between his prejudices and a $15 million client relationship. "Of course, if you prefer to work with Sarah, we can certainly accommodate that preference," James said, though his discomfort was obvious. "I don't want accommodation," Elena replied. "I want confidence that my advisor has full authority to serve my needs and access to all necessary resources. If there are limitations on Sarah's ability to serve my account effectively, I need to know about them now." The directness of Elena's challenge left James with no room for equivocation. He was being forced to either explicitly state discriminatory limitations or grant Sarah the authority she needed to serve high-net-worth clients. "There are no limitations," James said finally. "Sarah will have full access to all our resources and services." "Excellent," Elena said, her smile returning. "Then I'd like to begin the account transfer process immediately." After Elena left, James remained in the conference room with Sarah for a few minutes. His expression was difficult to read, combining irritation, confusion, and grudging acknowledgement. That was unexpected. he said finally. Dr. Vasquez is clearly a sophisticated investor, Sarah replied neutrally. Yes, she is. James paused, seeming to struggle with something. Martinez, I want you to understand that this account comes with significant responsibilities. Our reputation depends on providing exceptional service to clients of this caliber. I understand completely, Sarah said. I'm committed to exceeding her expectations. James nodded slowly. See that you do. And Sarah, I think it would be wise to discuss your approach with some of our senior advisors. Managing high-net-worth clients involves considerations that aren't immediately apparent from academic knowledge. Sarah recognized this as James's attempt to maintain some supervisory control while accepting the reality that she would be managing Elena's account. I'd appreciate any guidance you can provide. Over the following weeks, Elena's account transfer proceeded smoothly. More significantly, Elena's satisfaction with Sarah's services led to 2 additional referrals from other successful medical professionals in her network. Within a month, Sarah had acquired 3 new high-net-worth clients with combined assets exceeding $30 million. These successes provided concrete validation for Sarah's proposed market expansion, while demonstrating that her background and perspective were assets rather than limitations when serving clients from similar backgrounds. The ripple effects extended beyond client acquisition. David Kim began referencing Sarah's results in senior management meetings, using her success as evidence for the firm's need to diversify its client acquisition strategies. Other analysts started asking Sarah for advice about working with entrepreneurial clients. Most importantly, James's resistance to Sarah's advancement became increasingly difficult to justify in the face of her documented success with exactly the type of clients he had claimed she wasn't qualified to serve. Sarah realized that Elena's support had provided her with something she couldn't have achieved through individual effort alone. External validation that forced the organization to confront its own limitations and assumptions. Elena's willingness to take her business elsewhere if Sarah wasn't given appropriate authority had created leverage that Sarah could never have generated independently. This experience taught Sarah that her unexpected response to discriminatory treatment wasn't just about proving her individual capabilities. It was about demonstrating that the organization's narrow assumptions were limiting business opportunities and that expanding its definition of appropriate advisors could unlock significant market potential. The breakthrough had occurred not through confrontation or complaints about fairness, but through the presentation of compelling business results that were impossible to ignore or explain away. 6 months after Elena's initial meeting, Sarah found herself standing in the same premium conference room where she had once felt uncertain about her place in the organization. This time, however, she was presenting quarterly results to Pinnacle's senior management team, including the regional director who had flown in from San Francisco specifically to discuss her program's expansion. The numbers were undeniable. Sarah's specialized entrepreneur services program had generated $47 million in new assets under management, achieved client retention rates of 98%, and produced profit margins that exceeded traditional wealth management services by 32%. More importantly, her success had attracted attention from competitors, with 3 rival firms attempting to recruit both Sarah and her clients. These results are exceptional, said Patricia Walsh, the regional director, reviewing Sarah's presentation materials. Your client acquisition cost is significantly lower than our traditional marketing approaches, and your organic growth rate is unprecedented. Sarah nodded, feeling a confidence that would have seemed impossible just 6 months earlier. The key insight was recognizing that this market segment had been underserved not because of limited demand, but because of mismatched service delivery approaches. David Kim, who had become Sarah's strongest internal advocate, added his perspective. Sarah's success validates what we suspected about demographic shifts in wealth creation. Traditional approaches to client acquisition were missing significant opportunities. James, who was also present at the meeting, maintained his professional demeanor while clearly struggling with the implications of Sarah's success. Over the past few months, he had been forced to acknowledge her results while adapting to her expanded role within his department. The program has certainly generated impressive results, James said carefully. Though I think it's worth noting that managing rapid growth can present challenges that aren't immediately apparent. Patricia turned to James with a questioning look. What specific challenges are you referring to? James shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his vague concerns sounded weak in the context of Sarah's documented achievements. I simply mean that maintaining service quality while scaling operations requires careful management. Sarah's client satisfaction scores have actually improved as her client base has grown, David pointed out. Her service model seems to be highly scalable. Sarah recognized this as another attempt by James to maintain some reservations about her success, but she had learned to address such concerns directly, rather than allowing them to fester. Mr. Thornfield raises an important point about scalability, she said. That's why I've developed detailed protocols and training materials for the program. We can replicate these approaches with other advisors while maintaining quality standards. Patricia looked intrigued. You've created training materials? Sarah opened another folder. I've documented every aspect of the service model, including cultural competency training, specialized marketing approaches, and client communication protocols. The goal is to make these capabilities available throughout the organization, rather than limiting them to my individual practice. This response demonstrated Sarah's evolution from someone fighting for individual advancement to someone proposing systemic improvements that could benefit the entire organization. Her unexpected response had transformed from defensive self-advocacy to proactive organizational leadership. Patricia spent several minutes reviewing Sarah's training materials, occasionally asking detailed questions about implementation approaches. This is exactly the kind of innovation we need to maintain competitive advantage, she said finally. I'd like to propose piloting this approach in 3 additional markets, Sarah continued. Based on our demographic analysis, similar opportunities exist in San Jose, Phoenix, and Miami. The room fell silent as the senior managers processed this proposal. Sarah was no longer asking for permission to serve specific clients. She was recommending strategic expansion across multiple markets. That's a significant undertaking, Patricia observed. What kind of resources would be required? Sarah was prepared for this question. I've developed a complete implementation plan, including staffing requirements, training timelines, and financial projections. The initial investment would be approximately $380,000 per market, with projected break-even within 8 months. She handed each attendee a detailed expansion proposal, complete with market analysis, competitive assessment, and risk management strategies. The presentation represented months of additional work that Sarah had completed while maintaining her regular client responsibilities. David reviewed the materials with obvious admiration. This is comprehensive strategic planning, Sarah. You've essentially created a business plan for a new division. The opportunity is substantial enough to warrant serious consideration, Sarah replied. And our current success provides a proven model for replication. Patricia looked around the room, gauging reactions from other attendees. What's the timeline for making a decision on this expansion? I'd recommend implementing the first pilot market within 90 days, Sarah said. Market conditions are favorable right now, and delaying implementation risks allowing competitors to capture these opportunities. This sense of urgency reflected Sarah's growing understanding of business strategy and competitive positioning. She was no longer thinking like an individual advisor seeking advancement, but like a business leader identifying market opportunities. After the meeting concluded, Patricia asked Sarah to remain behind for a private conversation. Once the others had left, Patricia's demeanor became more informal and direct. Sarah, I want you to know that your success hasn't gone unnoticed at the corporate level. We've been watching your results closely, and frankly, you've exceeded everyone's expectations. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but she maintained her professional composure. Thank you, Miss Deputies. Walsh, I've been fortunate to work with exceptional clients who were ready for this type of service. It's more than good fortune, Patricia replied. You identified a market opportunity that others missed, developed innovative solutions, and executed flawlessly. That's precisely the kind of thinking we need in leadership positions. Patricia paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. I want to discuss something with you confidentially. We're considering creating a new regional position focused on emerging market development, someone who could oversee expansion of specialized service models across multiple markets. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate, understanding the implications of what Patricia was suggesting. That sounds like a fascinating opportunity. The position would involve significant responsibility and travel, but it would also offer substantial advancement potential. You'd essentially be building a new business unit from the ground up. I'd be very interested in learning more about the role, Sarah said. Patricia nodded. I thought you might be. I'd like you to think about it over the next few weeks. We'd probably be looking to make a decision within 60 days. As Patricia gathered her materials to leave, she made one final observation. Sarah, I want you to know that your success has been noticed by people who matter. 6 months ago, you were managing 8 small accounts. Today, you're being considered for a regional leadership position. That kind of trajectory doesn't happen by accident. After Patricia left, Sarah sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The regional leadership position would represent a quantum leap in her career, far beyond anything she had imagined when she first started challenging the limitations placed on her role. More importantly, she realized that her response to discriminatory treatment had evolved into something far more significant than individual advancement. She had identified genuine business opportunities that created value for clients, revenue for the firm, and advancement opportunities for herself and potentially other underrepresented professionals. That evening, Sarah called her parents to share the news about her potential promotion. Their pride and excitement were overwhelming, particularly her father's emotional reaction when she explained that she might be offered a position overseeing operations across multiple states. Mija, her father said, his voice thick with emotion. When we came to this country, we dreamed that our children might have opportunities we never had. But we never imagined anything like this. Sarah's mother added her own perspective. You've shown them that they were wrong about what you could accomplish. But more than that, you've opened doors for other people like you. This observation captured the broader significance of Sarah's journey. Her success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about demonstrating that organizations could benefit from expanding their definitions of appropriate leadership and challenging assumptions about who possessed the capabilities to serve sophisticated clients. Over the following weeks, as Sarah continued managing her growing client base while preparing for potential expansion responsibilities, she reflected on the unexpected path her career had taken. She had started with the simple goal of proving that she could perform as well as her colleagues in traditional wealth management roles. Instead, she had discovered that her background and perspective enabled her to identify and capture market opportunities that others had missed entirely. Her unexpected response to being mocked for her rank had been to demonstrate that the organization's narrow assumptions were limiting its own growth potential. The most satisfying aspect of her success was that it had been achieved through excellence rather than confrontation. She hadn't filed discrimination complaints or demanded special treatment. Instead, she had developed business solutions that were so compelling that resistance became impossible to justify. Sarah's clients now included not only successful entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, but also several traditional wealthy families who had been referred to her because of her reputation for innovative financial strategies and exceptional client service. Her cultural competency had become a competitive advantage that attracted clients regardless of their backgrounds. 3 weeks after the senior management meeting, Sarah received official notification of her selection for the regional emerging markets position. The role would involve overseeing expansion into 5 new markets over 18 months, with a team of 12 advisors and support staff reporting to her. On her last day as a senior analyst, Sarah cleaned out her corner cubicle and prepared to move to an executive office on the 28th floor. As she packed her personal items, Marcus Chen stopped by to congratulate her on the promotion. You know, Marcus said, when you first started, some people weren't sure how you'd fit in around here. I think it's fair to say you've changed everyone's perspective about what's possible. Sarah smiled, thinking about the journey from that first uncomfortable meeting with James to her current position preparing to lead a multi-state expansion initiative. I think we all learned something about assumptions and opportunities. As she looked around the analyst floor one final time, Sarah noticed several new hires who reflected the firm's evolving approach to recruitment and client service. The success of her entrepreneur program had influenced hiring practices, with the firm actively seeking advisors who could serve diverse market segments. James approached as Sarah was finishing her packing. His relationship with her had evolved considerably over the past months, moving from resistance to grudging acceptance to professional respect. Sarah, he said, extending his hand, I want you to know that your success has been impressive. You've accomplished things that I didn't initially think were possible." Sarah shook his hand, appreciating his acknowledgement while recognizing the limitations of his perspective. "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield. I learned a lot working in this department. If you ever need references or support in your new role, please don't hesitate to ask," James continued. "Your client results speak for themselves, and your expansion program has generated significant value for the firm." As Sarah took the elevator to her new office, she reflected on the completeness of her transformation within the organization. She had started as someone seeking acceptance and had evolved into someone creating opportunities for others. Her unexpected response to discriminatory treatment had been to exceed expectations so dramatically that resistance became counterproductive. Most importantly, Sarah had learned that the most effective response to being underestimated was not anger or complaint, but rather the development of capabilities and achievement of results that made discrimination impossible to maintain. She had transformed institutional limitations into business opportunities, proving that diversity of background and perspective could be sources of competitive advantage rather than obstacles to overcome. Standing in her new executive office, looking out over the Seattle skyline, Sarah understood that her journey was just beginning. The regional position would present new challenges and opportunities, but she approached them with confidence earned through demonstrating that excellence could overcome prejudice and that innovation could emerge from unexpected sources. Her story had become proof that the most powerful response to discrimination was not conformity or confrontation, but rather the creation of undeniable value that forced organizations to expand their definitions of leadership and success. Sarah had not just advanced her individual career, she had changed the trajectory of her organization's approach to talent development and market expansion. The young woman who had once felt uncertain about her place in a prestigious financial firm was now preparing to lead initiatives across multiple states, armed with the knowledge that her background was an asset rather than a limitation, and that her perspective could generate opportunities that others might never recognize.